growing older is better than the alternative, at least most days. Mark Twain said, all would live long, none would grow old. Andy Rooney said something like that, but Mark Twain was the first. Here's another one. The aging process has a good accelerator and bad brakes. You can speed it up a lot or slow it down some, but you can't stop it. And there's a lot of truth in that. You can do a lot to age quickly. I've seen some of my patients do that in the way they were living hard and fast, and they come back in, 5 years later and they look 20 years older. So age has a good accelerator and bad brakes, so don't hit the accelerator too often. Yeah. Here's another one. No diet, exercise, or anything else you do will convey immortality. Don't get the idea that you can beat this. That's in another whole realm. It's not science, that's spirituality and religion, and while those are very important, there's nothing you can do to beat aging. You can work on it. I like what Robert Frost said, the afternoon knows what the morning never suspected.
I like that.
Yeah, there are things that I know now that I never suspected in the morning. The other thing Twain said is, it's amazing how much my father learned between when I was 16 and when I was 20. And I hope my children found the same thing. Goldie Hawn, you think of her as a blonde dimwit, but she had something I think worth reading. She had something to say worth reading. What helps with the aging process is serious cognition. That is some really good thinking. Thinking and understanding. You have to truly grasp that everybody ages. Everybody dies. There's no turning back the clock. So the question in life becomes, what are you going to do while you're here? We're going to talk about what you can do to slow the aging process and things that will really help, but it's still going to happen. I'm not offering you some fountain of youth tonight. I wish I could. The best that we can do from the research is add, 9 to 10 years. And that's good, but in the larger scheme of things, it's not a lot, right? So what are you going to do while you're here? Here's another one. It is more important to live well than to live long. Now, I'd like both, right? But it's much more important to live well than to live long. And we would do well to emulate people who have made great contributions to the quality of our lives, even if they didn't live a long time. And I think if we focus more on that, what am I going to do with today, rather than, I really want to live for 100 years. Pity the poor person that lived 100 years and didn't do anything with those 100 years. That's the real tragedy. And my favorite is Miss Rumphius. How many of you have read that? Barbara Cooney. You must do something to make the world more beautiful. And that is the most important thing I'm going to say tonight. You need to do something. I need to do something to make the world more beautiful. There are people out there, of course, you never hear about them on the news because you don't watch the news, right? But there are people that are not working to make the world more beautiful. Let's not be part of that. whether we live just one more day or whether we live many more years, let's remember Barbara Cooney or Miss Rumphius's good advice: you must do something to make the world more beautiful. And I don't think that needs any explanation. We all have a sense in our inner beings what beauty looks like. And making the world more beautiful has to do with interpersonal relationships. It has to do with nature. It has to do with care of the animals, of the planet. It has to do with all of that. And each of us can make a contribution to making the world more beautiful for our having been here. And that's what I'd really like you to think about every morning when you get up. What am I going to do so the world is a better place for my having been here today? And we can all do that. And I would submit to you that even though I'm going to talk about diet and all those other things, that if you do that first, your life will have been worth living. And other people will remember you more fondly than if you just get up in the morning and say, now what am I going to eat today to live to be 100, right? Reminds me of something my grandmother said: if you're afraid your food will hurt you, it most assuredly will. The other thing she used to say is, don't talk about my diet at the dinner table, it's not polite. And I think there's some good wisdom in that. All right. So you have a graph there. Unfortunately, the lines aren't really dark, but I think you can see them. And if you can't, you can borrow my glasses. I have a pair here. That shows that I'm aging, and we're going to talk about why that is when we get to diet. Most of us in the United States are on the lower line. We start out pretty well with health. Most of us are born there at the 0 mark. Maybe some of you were born before that, and most of us die, by the time we get to 100. And what we'd all like is to be on that top curve, stay healthy, and not need medication and not be dependent on the medical doctors and all of that until just before we die. Isn't that what you want? Unfortunately, most of us are on the second curve, and we fall across that first line of dependence, and we become dependent on medication and procedures and the medical care system. I didn't say health care, I said medical care system. And then we get below that line and we get on some drugs, and that's okay. We're still living independently, but it's costing more money and more time in my office. And you don't want to do that. I mean, it's a nice place and I like to visit, but home is better. And then often you have that catastrophic event, and it's a heart attack or a stroke or some other disease, and then you drop below the activity of daily living line. So now you're dependent upon somebody else for your ADLs, that is, to help you bathe and help you wash and help you toilet and help you eat and help you take your medicines, and that's called nursing home. And that's called assisted living. And that's called home care. And how many of you are eager to cross that line? No takers? Yeah. Okay, so the whole point of the lecture tonight is really, what can we do if we're on that second curve to push ourselves up away from that line of dependence? Because no one wants that. I mean, if you tell me, look, I guarantee you're going to live to be 100, but you'll spend the last 30 years of your life in the nursing home. Is that good news? No. No. So tonight is about what can we do, hopefully, to stay above that medical dependence line, And if not above that one, at least above the activity of daily living dependence line. That's what we all want. And there are only 3 things that help us do that. The first is substance exposure. And under that you'll see there's diet or nutrition, and then there's all those other things that are there, like drugs and alcohol and smoking and environmental toxins and all of that. And that has a major impact on which curve you're on. Both of those do, toxins and nutrition. They have a major impact, and your choices in that area will be huge as far as what line you're on and what course you're on. And the next one is exercise. And we're going to talk more about nutrition, but this is just an overview. Exercise pushes you up on that line more than diet does. Diet pushes you up and extends your life, but it's exercise more than anything else that keeps you from crossing that line of activity of daily living dependence. How many of you exercise 90 minutes a day? Great. I am so happy to see that, because you get benefit up to 90 minutes a day of intense exercise. They recommend 30. Why do they recommend 30 rather than 90? Because they figured nobody'd do 90. But you get continued benefit and bounce off that line all the way up to 90 minutes a day. And if you don't hear anything else I say other than number 3, hear that. Exercise. Oh, it hurts to exercise. Well, it's going to hurt you more not to. Think about, every time you're exercising, you're taking a step away from that place you don't want to go, where you're dependent on somebody else. It's very, very important. As I've mentioned before, in men, there's one thing that predicts better than anything else whether a man is headed to a nursing home or not. You know what that is? Grip strength. Simple. How strong are you? Another way of looking at it is when you start to fall, not trip, but you're walking on level ground and you fall, I can graph a straight line from when you start falling on level ground to when you're going to be crossing that activity of daily living. If you can't walk safely, you can't live alone safely. It's really simple. And that has to do primarily with core body muscle strength. And you ought to be, if you're past 70, you ought to be doing daily core exercises, balance exercises to keep off that activity of daily living. Because when you start to fall, you're about ready to cross that line. And you don't want to do that. And they're very simple. If anyone wants me to show you some exercises, I can do it for that. When you're younger, aerobic is more important. When you pass 80, 75 to 80, when you're starting to get frail, you want strength training. Who should be in the gym pumping iron? Anybody over 80. Really. I mean, those young kids don't need to be building muscles. It won't hurt them, it'll help them, that's good. But who really needs it is 80 plus. That's the people that ought to be pumping iron. Because you need strength training then, more than anything else. And they've done some nice exercises. They were done at, studies. They were done at the VA hospital in Sepulveda, California. They took a group of men that were 100 years of age or more, and they gave them exercises to do, and every one of them built muscle. So if you're younger than 100, I know you can build muscle. And if you're 100, you still can. And strong bodies will really help you stay above that line of activity, daily living dependence. We have a physical therapist here. Carol, do you agree? All right. I send more people to physical therapy for balance and gait training than about anything else. They are wonderful. And if you're having trouble, if you're starting to stagger, go to your doctor and say, please send me the physical therapist for balance. It will do more for you than anything else to keep you independent. More than diet. You gotta know that. Now, the aerobic, why do I mention that for younger? Because that's your heart and that's stroke. You can still have a stroke and you can still have a heart attack after 80, of course. But when you pass 80, then we're talking about frailty. Because there's muscle loss with aging and you have to fight against it. So it's really important to do strength training and aerobics as much as you can when you're getting close to that. Very, very important. And then there's mental exercise. You know, David Snowden did a study, it's been 30 years ago now, it was called the Nun Study. There were a group of nuns who were in their 90s, and none of them had any evidence of dementia. A whole convent, they were active in teaching, grade school, and they couldn't believe all these old ladies that were sharp as a tack. And so they said, well, we're going to examine these ladies' brains as they die, because we can't imagine how they could live so long, and all of them have great mental capacity. And so one by one as they died, they did autopsies and they found that every one of them had Alzheimer's. But it wasn't clinically evident because they were still keeping their minds active, they were engaged in life, and here's the bottom line. I don't care if I have Alzheimer's as long as you can't tell and I can't tell, right? That's really where it is. If you're really functional, a little Alzheimer's is okay. Even if you've lost a few brain cells, if you're putting the ones to use that you still have, great. It's really important for us to understand that mental exercise is critically important. I've often thought that the epidemic of Alzheimer's has followed because we invented this thing called retirement. If you had to work, if you couldn't retire, if you had to stay engaged mentally, you'd probably keep your brain longer. I've seen so many people look forward to retirement, retire, and pretty soon they're numb as a frozen hen. You know, because all they did is they sat around and they ate and you know, didn't do much else. Watch TV, that'll really do it to you. Or the news, that'll really fry your brain. So I think we ought to have something new. We don't call it retirement, we call it retreading. And so we get ready to go again. Maybe some new task, but retirement is not good for your mind. Don't do it. Stay active. You can shift jobs. You know, I've often thought when I retire, the job I want is I want the job at Shaw's or Hannaford collecting those carts. You know, you could talk to lots of people and you'd get a lot of exercise, you know, and it would be great. And the only liability would be if you ran into someone's car. But, you know, what's the chance of that? So stay active mentally as well. Meaning and purpose. I can tell you story after story of people who, you know, they were on hospice or they knew their time had come, they were about to die, but they held on until Johnny got home, or they held on until they got this job finished. Well, maybe they would have held on and got better if they'd had real purpose in life. So have a purpose to your life, have meaning to your life. Like Goldie Hawn said, what are you going to do while you're here? You really need to have purpose and goals. And the best one is make the world more beautiful. And that's going to be different for each of us because we're not the same. And we shouldn't be doing the same, because if we were all doing the same thing, only one thing would get done. And that's not good. There are a lot of things that need to be done to make the world more beautiful. So please look for meaning and purpose. Maybe it's your grandchildren. Maybe you don't have grandchildren. Maybe it's animals. Maybe it's gardening. I had one patient who took on a project of a park in Bath. And for years and years and years, bent over and disabled as she was, she made sure that small park, it was just a circle where roads came together, was gorgeous. And she outlived everybody's expectations. Yeah, amazing what purpose and meaning could do, because she was determined that that place on the world was going to be beautiful. And it made a difference. I'd look at her and I'd think, how can you use a hoe or a rake? You can barely walk in here. But she was surprisingly stubborn. And she kept her corner of the world beautiful. Purpose and meaning are so very important. Now back to nutrition. How long do we have? I've got 3 lectures here, or 4, but let's first start with calories and micronutrients. You've heard of Michael Pollan. His dietary advice is really good. It's real simple too. He said, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. That's really important. If you eat too many calories, you're going to shorten your life. I'm just here to tell you it's going to happen. If you eat too many calories, you're going to shorten your life. There's lots of studies that show that caloric restriction lengthens life. In humans, in rats in laboratories, in mice, in all kinds of different, you restrict your calories. Now you want to get enough calories. You don't want to become nutritionally deficient, but neither do you want to carry around today next year's calories with you. Although that does give you more exercise, it's not the best for your body. So adequacy of nutrition, but not excess. Very important. That's calories. Now some people say, well, what kind of calories should I eat? Well, good calories. Not too much fat, not too little. Not too much refined carbohydrates, that's sugars. But our body runs on carbohydrates. I have people come into my office. I had a lady come in today. I'm trying to stay off of carbs. Why? Your brain runs on them. You want to be numb? Your brain doesn't run on anything but glucose unless you're on a prolonged fast. So give your body some glucose. And the best way to get it is as nature provides it, in fruits and whole grains and vegetables, so that the body can break it down slowly. Don't worry, no one was hurt. I was worried about that thing. Take it down, we like space. Yeah, we like freedom in here. Okay, so carbohydrates are not a poison. They're good for us as long as we don't get too many, and we'll talk about that when I talk about low ages, and I'll try to explain what that is. Micronutrients, that's your vitamins and your minerals and your polyphenolic antioxidants. And we have a multi-billion-dollar industry selling you these micronutrients in bottles. Don't take them. And it's much better to donate to a company than to buy those things and eat them. There's no evidence that taking your micronutrients in a capsule will do you any good unless you have a documented deficiency. Multivitamins have been shown over and over again to cause problems, not fix problems. And why is that? Well, it's best explained when you talk about water. If you don't get enough water, is that good for you? Is getting enough water important?
Yes.
How about too much water? That's called drowning. Yeah. And the same is true with vitamin A, or vitamin E, or vitamin D. Yeah, even vitamin D. The most recent research I've read on vitamin D is if you're supplementing vitamin D and your level gets out of the 20s up to the 30s, 40s, 50s, you're going to have an increased risk of osteoporosis, not a decreased risk. So nature likes to control things carefully. And if a little bit is good for you, that doesn't mean a lot is better. That's true with the vitamins, minerals, and all those other things in every study I've reviewed. Now, we might get one tomorrow that's different. And there is one exception, and that is in the elderly that are living alone, who aren't cooking. There was one study, but you know, I remember when my mother died when she was of breast cancer when she was young. My father remarried, and his wife died of a cerebral hemorrhage. And so he was there living alone, and I went to visit him, and I looked in his cupboard. Now, my dad was a gourmet cook. I mean, he could cook anything. We had a school function when I was in high school. I was the SA president, and he said, we had a Halloween party. And I said, Dad, would you make donuts for the Halloween party? He said, sure. Would you like pumpkin donuts? I said, well, yeah, that's festive. So what did he do? He went and got squash and made squash pumpkin donuts. I'm telling you, the kids thought they were manna from heaven. Now, they weren't good for you, but he could make anything. So what's he eating? Dry cereal. That's all he had, breakfast. I said, you know better than this. He said, I know, but what's the use? A multivitamin would have done him some good until he got out of his depression and was starting to cook again. So that's the one setting. If you're not eating anything but dry cereal 3 times, sugar pops 3 times a day, well, a multivitamin will help you. But you're far better off to get your vitamins and minerals the way nature provides them for lots of reasons. If you want to make sure you're getting the vitamins, eat the rainbow. Eat colors. All of the polyphenolic antioxidants follow colors. Eat the red, that's anthocyanins. Eat the yellow, that's the carotenes, beta-carotene, vitamin A. Eat the deep purples, those are anthocyanins as well. And on it goes. Eat the rainbow and you will get all the vitamins and minerals you need. And if the plants are healthy, you're going to be healthy. Why do I say that? Well, organic is better than pesticide-laden non-organic. But pesticide-laden non-organic is way better than not eating them. So whatever you can afford, eat. Grow your own is the best. Remember that frozen vegetables are great. The only thing that's better than frozen vegetables is fresh vegetables that you picked yourself or you got from your neighbor. How you got them, we'll leave that up to you, but fresh vegetables are better than fresh ones picked out in California and trucked here. By the time they get here, they've lost up to 40% of their nutrient value, whereas you only lose 10% if you freeze it. So don't feel bad if you're eating frozen greens because you can't afford the fresh ones. You may be better off to eat them. That's fine. But eat your greens. They're really important. And your yellows and your reds and your berries. Don't forget berries. And you can pick blueberries anywhere just about in the state of Maine, out in the pucker brush, and freeze them. And then you can have blueberries all winter long. If you buy them in the store, you pay an arm and a leg, but you can pick them and get the benefit of exercising your arms and your legs and your back, and you're far better off. So don't forget the berries because they're so rich in the phytonutrients. So there's the calories and micronutrients. And I'll go to anti-inflammatory next and then back to ages. You know, every chronic disease, cancer, heart disease, high blood pressure, you name it, is predicated or based upon inflammation. And if you lower the inflammation in your body, you will lower your risk of those diseases, and you will slow the progression of those diseases, slowing the process of aging. You'll be putting on the brakes to aging by reducing inflammation. Well, where does inflammation come from? Well, it comes from eating. Every time you eat something, you've got to oxidize it to utilize it. I mean, you're like your car. You know, you turn on the switch and it starts burning fuel, right? Well, you burn fuel too. And the only reason you don't die sooner is because the things that you eat have antioxidants in them that reduce inflammation. And so you want to eat foods that are rich in the antioxidants. That's anti-inflammation. Antioxidant, anti-inflammation is the same thing. And you want diets that are rich in those. Well, where do you find those? Well, that's what I was talking about, colorful food. There are no antioxidants, or very few, in meat, milk, eggs, cheese, fish, chicken, turkey, sugar. No antioxidants. Very few antioxidants in purified oil, more antioxidants in extra virgin olive oil, more in olives. So the more natural your food and the more plant-based your food, the lower your level of inflammation is going to be. I had a patient in my office just 2 weeks ago, and I had gotten a blood count on her, just as a general screen, and her white blood cell count was low. And she said, "Is that a problem?" I want to know. She was a vegan. I said, "No, that's not a problem. That just means that you have a lower level of inflammation than the average person. And generally speaking, people on a whole food, plant-based diet have lower levels of white blood cells running around in their body, because white blood cells are inflammatory cells. They cause inflammation. If you have any doubt about that, just take a wood splinter and stick it in your forearm and leave it there for a while. And it gets all red and hot. That's called inflammation, and that's white blood cells at work. And a vegan can mount a really vigorous response against that when they need to. But on a baseline, when they don't have an infection, their white blood cell count and their markers of inflammation are lower than people on a standard American diet. So they have lower rates of heart disease, of cancer, of high blood pressure, of arthritis, of inflammatory rheumatologic diseases, because they have higher levels of antioxidants. That's a basic principle that you need to understand if you want to slow aging. You slow inflammation, you slow aging. Questions about that? Yes. Okay, what about the deadly nightshade group? What are those? Potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant. Any others? Those are the most. Those are, in some people, related to arthritis. I'm really sorry if you're one of those people. It's really quite rare. And I would encourage you, before you give those up, to try those in organic rather than giving them up completely, because much of the inflammation we get in our food is from pesticides rather than from the plant itself. A classic example of that is wheat. Many people tell me, "Oh, I'm allergic to wheat." But if I'll switch them to organic, their allergy goes away. Why? Because of glyphosate. And here's inflammation again. Glyphosate is Roundup. And when they grow wheat commercially, they spray Roundup on the wheat just before they harvest it to kill the wheat so that it'll dry it and they can harvest it faster. And glyphosate's a great drug. It has a very low LD50, that is, you can drink about a half a cup of pure glyphosate and it won't kill you because you don't have the shikimate pathway of protein synthesis that bugs do, like bacteria and fungi and plants. But the bacteria in your gut do. So you drink that stuff, you kill the bacteria in your gut, and guess what goes up? Inflammation. Because one of the primary ways that a plant-based diet reduces inflammation is by stimulating the growth of bacteria in your gut that produce butyrate, which downregulate the immune system and drop the white blood cell count. That's why vegans have a lot lower inflammatory markers, because their gut is full of bacteria that eat fiber, and fiber-eating bacteria produce butyrate, reduce inflammation, help arthritis, reduce heart disease, etc., etc., etc. Big connection there. And the big ones with glyphosate, if you're interested, which screw up your gut bacteria or microbiome. By the way, you know, everybody's into probiotics these days, right? Why? Well, because they irradiate your food in the grocery store, kill all the normal bacteria that you used to get on them, and now you're not getting any source, and so you have nothing growing in there. So grow your own and don't wash them too thoroughly, and you'll get all the probiotics you need. They come from the soil. Just go out in your garden and pull a carrot and, you know, do that and then eat it. You've got great probiotics on it. There are more bacteria in a teaspoon of dirt than there are people on the planet. And that's probiotics. Billions of them, you know. You can say there are 10 billion bacteria in a teaspoon of dirt. And your grandmother said you got to eat a peck of dirt before you die, right? She was right. Just don't eat it all at once. All right. So that's anti-inflammation, and it has to do with eating the polyphenolic antioxidants, which are colors. That's the reds and the greens and the yellows and the purples. You know, if you can have purple cauliflower, don't eat white. If you can have purple cabbage, don't eat just the white part. The more colorful the food, the more antioxidants, and the better it is for you. So go for color. You know, that should apply to politics too, don't you think? Go for color. Embrace them all. We'd have a healthier planet if we did that. Now, let's see. Low age products. This is age products age you. That's all you have to know. But you'd probably like to know more, and I've talked about this before, so here goes. Advanced glycated end products. What does that word glycate mean? It means sugar attached to something. And if you eat a lot of sugar, you attach that sugar to proteins and fats in your body. Diabetics, if you get diabetes at 50, and it's average control, you know, your A1C, oh, that's good, it's 7. You will shorten your life on average by 9 years. Why? Because diabetics have higher than average blood sugars, and they glycate their proteins faster and their fats faster than the average person, because glycation occurs non-enzymatically. If I had a dish and I poured some protein in here, and I poured some sugar in here, and a little water and mixed it up, and walked away, I could come back, and those proteins and sugars would have complexed each other. That's called glycation. The problem is, when glycation occurs, it changes the structure of the protein or the fat. It stiffens it. Now, how many of you have noticed that when you get up in the morning, you don't jump up like you did when you were 6? And you know, you take a while to... That's glycation, okay? In a diabetic, we measure something, I mentioned it, called hemoglobin A1C. What are we measuring? What percentage of hemoglobin has sugar attached or glycated to it? Well, you know, I know what's going to happen when their glycated hemoglobin gets higher, because red blood cells are 7 to 8 microns in diameter, and capillaries are 3 to 4 microns in diameter. So you glycate the hemoglobin in that red cell and now it's stiff. How's it going to fit through there? It's not. Normally it squishes down, slides through really easily. Everything's happy. But when the diabetic has a high hemoglobin A1C, the red cell's stiff. Guess what else is stiff? The capillary is stiff. Have you ever heard of high blood pressure? One of the major causes is too much sugar. When the diabetic comes in and his A1C is high, I check his blood pressure, it's almost always up too. So it goes together, but guess what else glycation affects? Anybody wear cheaters like me? Why? Because your lens has stiffened. Why is it stiffened? Because you've glycated the crystalline protein in the lens and it made it stiff. How about congestive heart failure? One of the major causes of congestive heart failure is stiffening of the heart muscle from glycation. And you can glycate your fats, and so the fats in the cell wall get stiff. A great example of this was first demonstrated by Sanchez in 1965. I talked with him about his research. I met him at a conference. Delightful gentleman. What he did is he took a group of young medical students, because he worked in a medical school and they were always hungry, and he fed them the equivalent of a banana split, about 100 grams of sugar. And before he did, he drew some blood out and looked at the white blood cells and measured how fast they could eat bacteria. Then he gave them the 100 grams of sugar, and then took some white blood cells out after about an hour and measured how much sugar, how many bacteria those white cells could eat. Guess what happened? The membrane of the white blood cell stiffened as a result of glycation from that sugar, and the ability of the white blood cells to phagocytize or eat bacteria was cut by 80% for 4 to 6 hours, which is why I always look forward to the few days and week after Halloween and after Thanksgiving and after Christmas, because I know I'm going to have plenty of business in my office. Because everybody's eaten too much sugar, they've paralyzed their white blood cells, and they're ripe for infection, and after Easter as well. Glycation affects our entire system. It also can happen to the DNA, and then you can get problems with your DNA because it's stiff and it doesn't unwind right. And now you've got mutations, all from eating too much sugar or having high blood sugar. It accelerates aging. But until recently, we didn't know that if you eat food that's glycated, it also affects you. Now we know that if you glycate the food before you eat it, that gives a problem too. It accelerates aging. Well, how do you glycate food? By the way you eat, by the way you prepare it. It's high heat. You've heard me talk about this before, some of you. If you cook food at high heat, you will glycate it. And here's some examples. The best article was written by Jamie Urabari, published in 2008, Journal of American Dietetic Association, June of 2008. All he did was made a list of 500 different foods and what their glycated index level was. A banana has 9 kilounits of advanced glycated or aged products per 100 grams. An apple has about 12. A boiled potato has about 17. But if you French fry that potato, it goes to 1,544. Well, so now you're aging yourself. And guess what? That's more inflammatory as well. So you got the double age problem. The worst is with animal products which have no antioxidants. Have you heard of resveratrol? Why is it important? Because it prevents glycation. Plants don't want to be glycated. But if you take chicken and you squirt some lemon on it, because lemon helps prevent glycation, and you boil it, that has about 900 kilounits of aged products per 100 grams. If you fry it, it goes to about 9,000. If you barbecue it, it goes to 18,000. But if you have a friend that you don't really like too much anymore, if you're tired of your husband, just give him bacon, fried 5 minutes. It's 91,540. Yeah, that'll age you quick. Yeah. So, it's amazing what food does to us. It really is. You ever feel stiff? Well, maybe you ought to cut out the bacon. Yeah. All right, that's aged products. And so if you want to lower the aged products, you cut back on sweets and you cut back on high heat foods. You bake rather than broil. You boil rather than fry. And you don't barbecue, because that's higher heat. And I don't care if it's plants or animals. If you have nuts, for instance, if you roast the nuts, the glycated index level of roasted nuts is about 7,800. So roasted nuts aren't the best. Yes? If you do it at high heat, yes. If you do it until it's brown, the original research on this was done by a French chemist in 1912. His name was Maillard. And he wondered, what about browning? What happens with browning? Browning is glycation. Yeah. Now remember that vegetables resist that to some extent because they're packed with these chemicals that prevent glycation. And so you can get away with sauteing onions, but I wouldn't saute them till they're dark brown, because you're going to have more problems than if you do it lightly. And if you add oil to it, it'll really go glycated. Yeah. Pressure cooking, you do raise the temperature, but you don't raise it that high. And so that's far better than baking at high temperature. You don't have a problem, it's still in a water medium. But boiling is good. And some people say, well, why not all raw? Well, raw is great. You'll have the lowest glycated index level, but you don't absorb some of the, like beta carotene, et cetera, as well from raw food. So you got to eat a lot more of it and chew it a lot more thoroughly. So I say, be reasonable, raw and cooked, just like your grandmother did. She wasn't numb. Question?
How does microwaving affect?
Microwaving is in the middle, and it hasn't been studied real extensively. Some people are dead against it, but microwaving usually is done in the presence of water, and you don't microwave it till it's crisp. You try not to. Yeah. So it's the high temperature that really affects it when you're browning it a lot. Yeah. All right, so that's anti-inflammation, low-age, anti-inflammatory toxins. We can talk about these if you want, but lower's better. Alcohol always comes up, and alcohol is an interesting one. No one worries about tobacco anymore as far as they know it's not good for them. No one comes into my office and tells me I'm smoking for my health. No. But some people do come in and say, well, I've heard alcohol is good for me. It is. You didn't think I'd say that. It is. It's one drink a day will lower your risk for having a heart attack and increase your risk for cancer. Which would you rather have? Wow. And it will also, one drink will kill brain cells. They say, well, you got to have a little alcohol to preserve your memory. The biggest one on this is blue zones. They're going to be talking tomorrow? Tomorrow. Their tagline is vino and vegetables. And what I'd say is grape juice and vegetables. There's great stuff in wine for you, but it's not the alcohol. It's the resveratrol and the polyphenolic antioxidants. And 1 glass of wine a week will definitely increase a woman's chance for breast cancer. No question about that. There's no lower limit to that risk. I mean, it doesn't stop. So I don't think that I should do something that's somewhere in the middle. I want to do all good. So I say, eat the grapes. And if they got seeds, chew those up too, because there are properties in the seeds that are great. Did you know that grape juice is almost, well, in the studies that have been done, is as effective as aspirin at preventing stroke? That's the purple grape juice from Concord grapes, where they crush seeds and all and make the juice. Yeah. And I have some patients that can't take aspirin that I put on grape juice specifically because they're at high risk for stroke. And it definitely reduces their risk. Question?
Y'all usually talk about wine when you're talking about things like that.
Mm-hmm.
What about beer?
What about beer? It has less benefit and the same harm, except that it is lower in alcohol content than wine.
Really?
Slightly.
I mean, I hate beer, so I was just curious.
Yeah. You know, your liver's a wonderful thing, and you can get by with an occasional drink and you'll be fine. But every drink kills brain cells, and I don't know about you, but I don't have any I can spare. Yeah, there's a great study published in Annals of Neurology some years ago. It was in the November issue, I think 2006, showing that for every drink of alcohol, over time, there was a decrease in brain weight in the subjects. Well, I don't want to have a pinhead brain. I've been accused of it, but you know, I'd like to preserve my brain cells. There are compounds in the marijuana plant that can be very helpful. But above all things, don't smoke it. Smoking marijuana does exactly the same thing to the vasculature, only worse than smoking cigarettes, tobacco. Don't smoke marijuana. It will be shown to cause just as much heart disease as tobacco, because it's a smoke. I don't want you to smoke lettuce leaves or oak leaves. I don't want you even to climb up on your roof and breathe the smoke of burning wood, because it's not good for you. It's inflammatory. Smoke is full of oxidized particles and ozone and all of that.
Why do they call it medical marijuana?
Because they're trying to sell it to you. This is big, big business. First they called it medical marijuana so it would be legal. Now they call it that so that they can take it and not worry about it. And I'm not going to get into about the other forms or vaporizing, all that. All I'm saying tonight is do not smoke anything. Not the meats, not the tobacco, don't smoke it. Don't smoke it. Yeah. Right. You're exactly right. If you're a diabetic, the sugar can give you a problem. Don't drink any juice between meals, because juice alone will shoot your sugar right up. If you're going to have some, 4 ounces at most. In fact, they did the study on 2 tablespoons. I'm sorry, on 2 teaspoons. 2 teaspoons of grape juice was shown to have an antiplatelet effect. So I say, don't get out the grape juice bottle and give me 2 teaspoons. I want a half a cup, because I want to make it worth the pour. And it's not going to hurt you if you have it with a meal and you have high fiber. Would it be better to eat grapes? Yes. Sure.
Now your shot glasses has fallen.
Okay, a shot glass of grape juice. Okay. It's hard for me to have a shot glass of grape juice. You know, I just really like it. but only with a meal and with high fiber, etc. Great question, though. Pardon?
Mixing it with water is not as...
Well, I guess you could mix it with water, but, you know, it's up to you. I don't want you to go home and say, we're all going to drink grape juice. But you can go home and say, let's all eat grapes.